happens. But you'll see that here we're talking about mind-body medicine, Alzheimer's, and caregiving. To start out, let's define mind-body medicine. And that's simply a non-invasive, non-pharmaceutical practice that focuses on the connection between the mind and the body and the mental, social, emotional, and spiritual factors that can directly affect our health and well-being. I worked, prior to going into my own private practice, I worked at one of the large cancer treatment centers here in the area, and I had a patient there, a cancer survivor, who told me, she said, you know, the doctors did a wonderful job curing my body, but it was mind-body medicine that saved my life. And that's an example I like to use to try to draw upon what mind-body medicine is, because there's so much more to us than just our body. So when we say we're not well or we're sick or we're hurting or whatever, there's so much more involved in that than just the body. There's the mind and the spirit and all of those social and emotional factors that go along with it. A couple of things that I like to say just to help summarize that point is we know from research that what we think and how we feel emotionally impacts how our body functions. And also with every thought, there is a physical reaction. Now, we don't think about that much, and we especially don't think about it when we have a fleeting thought and we realize, oh, I just felt happy. You know, we don't think about, oh, maybe there was an increase in the production of dopamine or serotonin, or, you know, maybe if we experience something sad or see a sad commercial on TV, but yet it's over in a few seconds. We don't really think about, I wonder if that thought or that emotional response triggered the production of cortisol in my body, which is known as the stress hormone. When we have fleeting thoughts, they seem to just come and go. But for many of us, we actually have many, many thoughts, and we have repeated thoughts. We think the same thing over and over and can get into thought streams that can create a whole cascade of physiological functions and actions that go on in our body. Actually, research shows us that the average person has 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And I hate to share with you that most of those thoughts are considered negative. And I thought, how could that possibly be, especially for those of us who make a point to try to stay focused positively. And then I remembered that, you know, usually if my alarm sounds in the morning, my first thought is, oh, drat. And then if I'm getting up and I'm walking into the bathroom and I catch a sight of myself in the mirror, I think, oh my, what a hot mess. You know, so I think these negative thoughts can come into our line of thinking without us noticing it sometimes. And so it's important that we realize that with every thought, there is a physical reaction in our body. The good news side of that is that with every thought, there is a physical reaction. So if we can concentrate and learn how to focus our thought, we can actually use our thoughts for healing and for well-being. Before we go into looking at some of the mind-body medicine practices, I'd like you to just do, this is actually a mind-body medicine practice, it's just a little bit of guided imagery. And so I invite you so that you can experience a bit of what I'm talking about. Just take a minute to imagine yourself. If you want to close your eyes, that's fine. It might help you shut out distractions and help focus a bit. If not, just have a soft stare toward the floor. But just imagine yourself in a kitchen. It can be your kitchen. It can be a kitchen from your past, maybe your grandmother's kitchen. Just whatever kitchen you would like to place yourself in your imagination. And I'd like you to look around that kitchen and just notice in your mind's eye, is there sunlight coming in through the window perhaps? Or maybe you hear the drone of the refrigerator in the background. Just notice what you see and hear in that kitchen. And then imagine in your mind's eye a counter, the countertop in the kitchen. Allow yourself to walk over to that countertop, and you notice there that there's a lemon sitting on the counter. It's a nice, juicy, plump yellow lemon. You actually pick the lemon up and you feel it. You can kind of feel the crevices on the lemon skin. And you do notice it does seem especially plump and juicy. So you set the lemon back down. There's a cutting board there and a carving knife, your favorite carving knife. So you pick up the carving knife and you gently slice through that lemon. And you notice that there's kind of a little tough outer edge, and then it gets softer as it gets to the pulp of the lemon. And you also notice that some juice of that lemon just squirts right out onto the knife and into the air, and you can smell the lemon. And then you go ahead and you slice the half lemon into quarters. And once again, the juice of the lemon pearls up on the knife. And it's so tempting that you take a slice of that lemon and you raise it to your mouth and you decide to take a nice, good suck on that lemon. And we'll stop the little imagery right there. And I know that I can't hear you and can't get your responses back at this time, but I'd like you to just notice for yourself, what did you experience when you were in that kitchen? Could you actually hear some of the sounds, see some of the sights? But most importantly, I want you to notice if you had any reaction at all to the lemon. As you cut the lemon and you heard about the juice, could you smell it? And could you even taste it? Did you notice that you had more saliva thinking about the lemon than not? Generally, that's the response I get, is that people do start to salivate. I start to salivate when I'm just leading people through on this presentation. So that is an example of how our thoughts can actually create a physical response in our body. There was no lemon in front of us. There were no real smells or the real touch of a lemon, no real juice of a lemon. Yet even just those thoughts created a response within ourselves, even to the point for some of us to have increased saliva. It's just an example of how what we think can influence what happens and what goes on in our bodies. Thanks for doing that with me. So you've heard me say, okay, that was a little bit of mind-body medicine. When I'm talking about mind-body medicine, I'm talking about things like meditation, guided imagery. You know, meditation primarily is the focusing of our attention, and we'll do a little bit of that later. Guided imagery is what I just led you through. I encouraged you to use your imagination to take yourself to a certain place or to experience certain things. Breathing techniques, you know, where we control our breathing and slow it down and have some long inhales and some slow exhales. That's a mind-body medicine practice. Using art as a way to express ourselves and to understand ourselves better. Using art to express our feelings in a way that words don't have the capacity to express, or to journal or yoga. You know, the patient support groups that Alzheimer's Association has, that's a form of mind-body medicine. It's non-invasive, it's non-pharmaceutical, but it definitely impacts how we feel, and it impacts our health and our well-being. Prayer is a form of mind-body medicine. In fact, it's the most often practiced form of mind-body medicine. Music, creative arts, biofeedback, where we use a mechanical instrument to help us know and gauge our emotions and our body functions such as temperature and heart rate. Tai Chi, which is an energy exercise similar to yoga, Qigong, and even hypnosis. These are all forms of mind-body medicine that are recognized by the National Institute.
We'll turn this off.
So I wanted to say just kind of up front That research demonstrates the use of mind-body medicine by persons with a variety of chronic illnesses, whether it be Alzheimer's or heart disease or asthma or hypertension. A variety, even cancer falls into that category. But the use of mind-body medicine with a variety of chronic illnesses enhances both quality of life and the length of life. And mostly, mind-body medicine works on the endocrine system, our immune system, and our autonomic nervous system. Now, our autonomic nervous system is that part of our nervous system that when we become very frightened, we automatically get a burst of adrenaline and our body gears up to what we know as fight or flight. It prepares us in an automatic way for what's coming next in our life. That's one piece of it. That is the sympathetic part of our autonomic nervous system. The other side of our autonomic nervous system is the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the part that comes in like a paramedic would when the parasympathetic. It's when the paramedics rush in and they say, calm down now, you're getting too excited, there's too much emotion in this, in your system right now. For your own well-being, you need to calm down. That's that automatic part of us that helps calm us down when the threat or the fear or the risk is over. So that autonomic nervous system will gear us up when we need to be on our toes to defend and protect ourselves. And then it also calms us down when it's time for our body to rest and relax. It's important that we have this system in our body because we need to be able to protect and defend ourselves. But if we drove ourselves, just like we drive our car sometimes, with a pedal to the metal and full speed all the time, and never let it slow down and rest, what happens to that car? It will often either run out of gas before it needs to, or even break down. And it's the same for us. So it's very important that that parasympathetic nervous system say, okay, time to slow down, because we want to always have enough human fuel to keep going and to keep running. In mind-body medicine, by the use of meditation or guided imagery or yoga or any of these forms of practice, they help kick our nervous system into that mode of, okay, now it's time to calm down. When our parasympathetic nervous system is functioning, we are able to produce hormones more like dopamine that help us experience pleasure, or serotonin that helps us be happy and feel good. When we slip into that sympathetic nervous system where we're all geared up and ready to fight and protect ourselves and always on edge, that's when our body produces more of the stress hormone called called cortisol. And cortisol is known to have a number of negative effects on our body. It doesn't allow our immune system to function properly. It increases our blood sugar. It increases our heart rate. It limits our ability to use the full capacity of our lungs. It has many deleterious effects on the body. And so it's important, by controlling this autonomic nervous system, that we give our body the best chance it can possibly have to function at its optimum. And that's what mind-body medicine is aimed at doing. I wanted to give you a few tips about what are some of the specifics that research shows about Alzheimer's or dementia of whatever form and mind-body medicine practices. The research definitely shows that the practice of mind-body medicine slows the progression of cognitive decline. It shows that the practice helps persons to manage stress better, to manage depression, and the inflammation. Now, if we think about that, often the plaque that occurs in the brain is a reaction to inflammation that is going on in the brain. To know that mind-body medicine factors can actually decrease those anti-inflammatory markers is a big deal. We also know that it can produce clinically relevant treatment. It's known as a clinically proven, or at least substantive treatment for dementia. And like you know, my personal experience is wanting to know also, how can I use this for me as a caregiver? And it is known for caregivers to help reduce perceived stress, anxiety, depression, and salivatory cortisol. That's how it's usually measured in these tests and this research, is through our saliva. It's known to actually reduce the amount of cortisol in family caregivers. I included this page of citations so you knew I wasn't just making some of this stuff up. There really is quite a bit. We used to have to rely on anecdotal experiences of what mind-body medicine did, because we didn't have sufficient resource and research to document it. But that isn't at all true now. We have quite a lot of research now to show the effectiveness of mind-body medicine. So a point to just take away with you is that mind-body medicine works on the part of the brain that regulates emotion. That's why when I use guided imagery, I can actually get you to feel that you're in a kitchen somewhere, and to actually smell the lemon that's not actually there. It works on parts of the brain that engages our senses and helps us regulate emotion. And it works on the part of the nervous system that can change from fight to flight to rest and digest. I have this little photograph here. I don't know how clear it is for you, but it's of a little girl with like a soft feathery thing right to her face. I chose that picture because if you think about it, when a feather gets brought to our nose or to our face, it can either be soothing to us, or it can make us go, oh no, feather on my nose, you know, and tickle your nose. That's kind of how life is. When things come our way, whether good or bad, we have a choice at that moment to decide, is this going to be a calming experience, or is this going to be something that's going to get me all heightened and flustered? There's a key element to mind-body medicine that brings about a lot of the changes that research shows, and that element is called mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is the ability to pay attention on purpose to the unfolding of present moment experiences with a sense of alertness, attention to detail, with kindness and compassion, and without judgment. Now, there's a lot in that description there, because mindfulness is a very powerful concept and tool that we can all use. And I always like to make sure people know that I promise you are not the only person in the world who cannot practice mind-body medicine or who cannot be mindful. I promise you're not. We can all practice these mindfulness ways. In talking about this just a tad more, mindfulness is being very present in the moment. How many times do you step into your shower in the afternoon or in the morning, and yeah, you're getting clean, you're getting washed, you're even washing your hair and soaping up your body, but you are thinking of everything else under the sun except what you're doing in that shower. Well, at that moment, you are not mindful, because mindful means your attention is right here in the present moment and on what you're doing. So if you were going to be mindful in that shower, you would be taking a shower and you wouldn't be planning the activities for the rest of the day. Instead, you'd be noticing, oh, wow, this water, it's so warm, it's just the right temperature. And oh, I feel the bubbles on my hands and from the shampoo in my hair. I hear the sound of the water hitting on the bottom of the tub and maybe even splashing onto the shower curtain. Being mindful means you're very aware in the present moment of what is happening in the present moment, with a real sense of alertness and attention to detail. Now think about it. If you're very much in the present moment, can you be worrying about what might happen tomorrow? Or can you be fretting over what happened in the past? No, there's only room for being alert and present in the moment. So when we stop that worry over what might happen eventually, and when we stop that regretting and reflecting over what happened in the past, what happens? We basically stop suffering. We're very present, we're very engaged, but we're right here, right now, and we're not caught up in the what might have been and the what might be. Now, along with that, to be mindful means to have kindness and compassion for yourself and for others, but to be patient with yourself. How many times do we get upset with ourselves because we didn't do something well enough? Or, gosh, if we could have only done it better. To be compassionate to ourselves means that not only are we mindful and present in this moment, but we are so with understanding and knowing that we're doing our best at all times. If we can be kinder to ourselves, once again, we're eliminating so much of the suffering that's going on. And what do you think that's doing to your body? What do you think that's doing to the cortisol levels in your body? It's taking them right down, because there's a form of acceptance going on in your innards, your insides know about that, and all the good hormones that help regulate the body in positive ways can be produced. Now there's a second, this very last point about mindfulness that I wanted to make is without judgment. If you think about it, we are constantly making judgments about things. And I'm not talking about whether we like someone's dress or, oh, I don't think they're a very good person or they're very nice. I'm not necessarily talking about that, but we're always evaluating what we think, an opinion about what is going on. So maybe I, in presenting this, am not talking quite loudly enough. And along with noticing that I'm not talking loudly enough, you realize that, she's not talking loudly enough, and that really annoys me. Or maybe the room that you're in right now isn't quite the right temperature. And rather than just, okay, it's cold in here, rather than just noticing the temperature in the room, we go on to make a judgment about it of, it's cold in here and I hate it when I'm cold, and it makes it where I can't function when I'm cold. And our thoughts just go running and running and running. And before we know it, we've ruined our whole day because we decided we were not happy with the temperature in the room, and that we made a judgment and had opinions about that in a way that escalated, and I often say took us down the rabbit hole. If we can not only be present in the moment where we're fully alert and present to what's going on now, but also to not be judgmental, to just know, hey, it's cold in here. That's just the way it is. There's no emotion attached to that. There's no jumping down the rabbit hole with that. Or, you know what? She's not talking quite loudly enough. Just noticing, accepting, being present with it. When we do that, we stop ourselves from getting our nervous system all riled up and alert. And we simply allow ourselves and our body to function in the present moment at its very best. Now, when I'm using the term body, but of course, when I'm doing that, I'm including the brain. When I talk about the brain, I'm not talking about the mind. When we think about the brain, that's an organ that you can feel and look at on imaging. You can even watch how it fires from one neuron to the other. When I'm talking about the mind, I'm talking more about consciousness, that stream of thought that comes into our awareness, where we have opinions about things, or we experience the emotions of things, how we interpret our world. That's our mind, separate from our brain. But what our mind creates does impact the chemicals and the hormones that are produced in our brain. and it does make an impact. So I put this second piece down here in this slide, and it says, mindfulness truly can be a potential difference between suffering and joy, because how we perceive things, how we accept things in life, determines how we're going to experience it. So I have mind-body medicine and Alzheimer's disease here, but actually the benefits of mindfulness, and this is some of the work of Daniel Siegel, but it's certainly by all the leaders in the field of mind-body medicine. These are some of the benefits of the practice of mind-body medicine: higher brain function, increased awareness, increased clarity in thinking and perception, lower anxiety levels, greater calm and internal stillness, an increased sense of connectedness. So while they do apply to Alzheimer's, this is in general. So what I'm talking about here, these are things that we can find from brain scans of people who practice mind-body medicine regularly, things that we can find from cortisol levels or different forms of subjective and objective testing. One thing that we notice, and I should have included a slide on here that showed you this, is people who practice mind-body medicine seem to have more activity in that prefrontal cortex of the brain rather than in the emotional piece of the brain, in the amygdala. There's actually a thickening of activity in fibers, neuronal fibers, between the amygdala down deep in the center of the brain as it flows up into the prefrontal front part of the brain. And what that is showing is that there is more use of the part of the brain that is higher functioning. That prefrontal cortex allows us to experience life with our highest ability, rather than getting sucked down in some primitive, fear, emotional way of looking at life. We're able to think about it more clearly, to perceive it with more clarity. And all of that in turn helps lower our anxiety levels and creates a greater sense of calm and internal stillness. Now, with mind-body medicine, we find if you can begin practicing these skills before you're in a crisis, then when the crisis comes, you have them there ready to use. You can still develop them while you're in the middle of crisis, but there's a bit more challenge there because there's more going on. And it's the same with Alzheimer's. We find that the best use of mind-body medicine practices can have the most impact for persons who are in the early stages of dementia or Alzheimer's. You can still use it with persons as they progress. You have to shift and change so that it can be grasped by them and perhaps followed by them. But it can be used. But I will say, and I noticed this from watching and using some of these practices with my own husband, it's certainly much easier in the earlier stages. And then I find, this is just with my husband, this is not research, documented research. I have to use more things like music or touch, things that don't require his necessary comprehension of how to do something or how to practice something. But it certainly does continue to work. And what they notice with the use of mind-body medicine in persons with dementia is if you can practice it regularly, it does tend to slow the progression of dementia. Now, when I say practice it, what am I talking about? Am I talking about becoming a monk where you have to sit every day for 12 hours a day and practice meditating? No, I'm not. Studies show that if you practice, say, meditation for even 10 minutes a day for a 3-week period, there are structural changes in the brain. There was a study done out of Harvard that showed that persons, just average people like you and me, who practice mindfulness meditation for 8 minutes a day for 21 days actually had increased gray matter in the brain. So I'm not necessarily talking about having to practice something for months and even years or decades, but I am talking about needing to practice these techniques consistently and over time. When I worked at the Cancer Center, I was at Mary Bird Perkins and I started a clinic, and we had cancer patients come in for 4 hours a day, twice a week for 6 weeks. And that was very intentional. That 4 hours twice a week for 6 weeks gave us the continuity of practice over time. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about consistent practice. Whoop. I somehow quit sharing. Let me see here. So I guess a point that I'm wanting to make, and I realize our time is going very quickly here. This is a quotation by Viktor Frankl, who's an Australian neurologist, psychologist, and Holocaust survivor. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Between the time something happens, stimulus, and our response, even though it may be a nanosecond or whatever kind of little space there is that opportunity to choose how we respond. Persons who practice mindfulness and practice mind-body medicine are shown to be less reactive. They're shown to, and when they have that choice of how to respond, it's truly a choice. They can decide whether to hop on that anxiety train, or they're going to say, you know what, I'm going to keep my cool and use all my present resources to manage the situation. They seem to have more capacity to do that. And here, that's what I'm saying. It increases your capacity to choose your response, and it facilitates the benefits. One other thing I just want to say is that even though these may be practices that you do for 10 minutes a day, every day of the week or 5 times a week or whatever, even though they're short-term states of mind, if you practice them over time, they actually become a trait. I often hear people say, I was born a nervous Nelly and I'll never change. Well, I'm here to say I was born a nervous Nelly, but you know what? Research on mindfulness shows that we can change our initial way of being from being a nervous worrier to being less reactive and allowing our brain and our body to function on a more even keel, balanced way of being. So we have just a few minutes here. I do want to help you learn one mind-body medicine practice. You can see from these up here that I have breath listed first. And just know that if you have further interest in mind-body medicine practices, I'm more than happy to talk with you and speak with you about them. But I will say our breath is our quickest and our most effective way of calming our nervous system and creating the most change within our bodily function. So when they say just breathe, they're accurate. Just breathe. It will calm your nervous system. So I'd like you to practice a form of mind-body medicine with me and just a very brief breathing practice, just simply of slowing your breath. So if you will, just place your feet flat on the floor just as a way to kind of ground yourself and center yourself. And I'd like you to just notice your breath. When you breathe, is your upper part of your chest kind of hopping up and down? Or is that breath coming real deep in your belly so that your belly is actually moving when you breathe in and out? Where are you breathing from? Our goal is to have that belly move so that we're getting a good deep breath. But from wherever you're breathing, I'd like you to notice that breath, and I'd like you to see if you can breathe real slowly with me now to the count of 4. Breathe, 2, 3, 4. Now just hold your breath just for a slight moment or two, and exhale real slowly with me to the count of 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Let's do that again. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Just hold just for a minute, and exhale, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. In those few seconds there, I just showed you or demonstrated a mind-body medicine practice of breathing, controlling your breathing. When you do that, you are slowing your nervous system and you're making a huge impact on your body. And over time and with practice, it can make a big difference in how you feel and how you function. You see in the notes here, I say use your phone, because your phone is full of guided meditations and guided breathing exercises, even yoga, whatever you want. It's on your computer or your phone. And like I said, I'm more than happy to work with any of you in doing these skills. This is how you reach me. And let's see, if I stop sharing now, you won't have this. But Ellen, can you go ahead and make it to where we can see people and hear people?
Yep.
Okay.
If you go into gallery view, you can see anybody, Francinne, who has their camera on.
Of course, where is that?
Top right corner, you should see some little buttons to where you can see everybody.
Oh, yeah. There we are. Nice to see everyone.
And I can also send out your contact information afterwards too.
Okay, great. Does anybody have any questions? And I know Taylor's on the line too, in case you had questions for Taylor. But it's hard for me to gauge things when I'm not actually seeing your face when I'm talking. But does anyone have any questions or thoughts about what we were talking about?
We do have one question in the chat box. So if anybody has questions, I encourage you to go down to the bottom of your screen, click that chat, and just send a message, and I'll be able to read them off to Francinne. So the question we have right now is, what ways can long-term care facilities implement mind-body medicine for their residents and even staff? Pretty sure it's needed, especially during these times.
Right, that's a great question. I have lots of ideas of how to do that. And they are simply to work one-on-one with their patients and teach very simple practices of, breathing or using that guided imagery or, just using the different practices. There are also ways of holding workshops for the staff members as well as the residents, and talking to them about, what is it like when you feel out of control or overly excited, and, how can we help you calm your body down, and talking about mind-body medicine and that relationship between the mind and the body. And then just teaching, these practices are very simple. They don't cost anything. How about that? They don't cost anything, so it's medical care that is free. And you teach people to do these skills themselves, because it's at 2 a.m. that people can't sleep, or they get into pain, or their mind starts racing. If we can teach these skills to people so that they can use them when they need them, they don't have to wait on a doctor's appointment, or they don't have to go and find someone to help. You have the ability within yourself, and that's a very empowering feeling to know you have the ability to help yourself. So I think it's the matter of just teaching staff how to use it with the residents, teaching residents how to use it with themselves, letting people like me come in and share some of these thoughts, and then just getting the ball going with it.
Great, thank you.
I have done some of these trainings at St. James Place. I've been really busy with my other work, so I haven't been able to do a lot of it, but I do hope to do more of it.
Another question we have, I know you mentioned that there's a lot of good apps out there for mind-body medicine and meditation. Is there any in particular that you would recommend? I feel like that's an easy thing that caregivers can do at home right now, you know, with their loved ones. So any that you would in particular say are better than others?
Insight Timer. It's, you know, INSIGHT timer.com. You can download the app from there. It's free. It will offer to let you buy something, but there's no need to buy it. It's the largest free meditation and mind-body medicine resource that's out there. There are many. A lot of times, if I'm in a hurry, I'll just go to Google and put in, like, say I want a guided imagery for the beach. I just put in guided imagery beach, and it'll simply pull up hundreds of them. But if I were to use, and I can get that to Ellen and she can get it to you too, but I do have a list of some of the most popular ones, but my go-to is Insight Timer.
Okay. We have another question asking if you can elaborate a little bit more on meditation.
Yes, I would love to have lots of time to share meditation with you. Meditation is actually focused attention. So if I were to teach you, and there are several types of hundreds of types of meditations, but the one that gets practiced most in the Western world, in the United States, is called mindfulness meditation. And that's where you simply bring your attention back to one object. And anytime your mind wanders, you bring it back to that same object. So in mindfulness meditation, you constantly are refocusing your attention on your breath. So to demonstrate, I'm going to pay attention to my breath as I inhale and as I exhale. And I notice that I'm inhaling again and I'm exhaling. And then I notice that I'm thinking about what I need to get from the grocery store. At that moment, I realize that my attention and my focus has shifted. So if I'm practicing meditation, I'm simply bringing my attention back to my breath. And I focus on my inhale and my exhale and my inhale and my exhale. And then I notice I'm thinking about needing to wash the dishes, but I bring my attention back. At that moment, when I realize my attention has shifted, I'm very mindful. It's when I am all the way to the mall before I realize I'm not thinking about my breath anymore, that I'm mindless. But when I realize my attention has shifted and I bring it back to my breath, I'm very mindful. Now, what we notice from the practice of doing this, by getting your brain to focus and be still, is the activity in your brain settles. Our brain fires in a repetitive fashion. And so it's just like water. Water will flow in the path of least resistance. Well, we create pathways in our brain. So if we think the same thought over and over again, we've created a neuronal pathway. And that pathway is the easiest way for our brain to fire. So if we think, oh my gosh, what if I lose my job? Oh my gosh, what if I lose my job? Oh my gosh, what if I lose my job? That is a pathway, and that's where our attention is going to go. But if we give our brain something else to focus on, and it knows how to stop jumping all around and to just focus, be still on the breath, it actually develops a new habit. So that's how we become less reactive. When we're just living life on a day-to-day, if we have established a practice where our brain knows how to focus and be still, that's its go-to. It's no longer going to jumping all around. And that's how we change ourselves from being someone who's very reactive and nervous and jumpy to being more focused. That's a very poor example of what meditation can do and what does. It's kind of the 2-minute version, but meditation is, in a summary, it's the focusing of attention and creating a practice within yourself so that you automatically know how to bring your attention back and not be jumping all over the place. They call it monkey mind. It's to get you to change from having a monkey mind to just having a focused mind.
Great. Thank you, Francine. And I do have a few comments I'd like to read out to you. Just a lot of good feedback we're getting in the chat. Barbara said, thought it was a nice presentation. Laura shared that it was an excellent presentation. Barbara also shared Alzheimer's Services provides a training for nursing homes and dementia care. And then we have some feedback from Taylor with Garden View that says she has personally used an app called Breathe as well as another way for that. So thank you for that recommendation. Does anybody, we have about a minute left. Does anybody else have another question or comment they would like to share with Francine or Taylor during this time? Okay, well, I want to thank you, Francine, so much. This was a wonderful presentation. I feel calmer just by listening to it. So I thought it was absolutely wonderful. And if anybody has any questions, I will send out Francine's contact information so that you can reach her. And also thank you to Taylor from Garden View just for your information at the beginning as well. And thank you to everybody who joined in. I hope many of you will join us for the other 4 days of this week that we'll have some content going on Zoom. And if there's anything else, just reach out to me and I will do my best to help you out. So thank you guys so much for joining in. I hope to see many of you tomorrow.
Namaste.